A dog's nose never lies, but human hands tell terrible stories. Clara knelt in the thick, wet mud, breathing heavily. Her rescue dog, a brilliant mixed breed named Ranger, barked happily. He had just found a missing hiker buried under a fallen tree. The local crowd cheered loudly for them. Ranger was not a normal animal. He possessed an incredible sense of smell and a deep, emotional connection with his owner. Clara understood his silent language perfectly. They were the absolute best rescue team in the state. However, one man stood silently in the dark shadows, watching them with cold, jealous eyes. Victor was Clara's teammate, but he did not feel any joy. He was a desperate, greedy man. He had a massive gambling debt with very dangerous criminals in the city. He desperately needed the government's $500,000 rescue grant to save his own life. Clara and Ranger were completely blocking his path. That night, Clara locked her wet gear in the team locker room. She kissed Ranger's head gently and went home to sleep. She did not know Victor was waiting quietly in the empty building. He moved slowly into the dark, secure storage room. He knew exactly what he needed to steal. Victor picked up 3 expensive thermal drones from the top shelf. The high-tech cameras were worth tens of thousands of dollars. He carried the heavy machines directly to Clara's metal locker. He used an illegal master key to open her door quietly. He pushed the stolen drones deep inside her personal bags. Victor knew a simple frame-up was never enough. The center had many other trained police dogs. They would easily smell his guilty scent on the stolen equipment. He had to build a perfect, biological lie to destroy Clara completely. He reached into his dark jacket pocket and pulled out a secret weapon. He pulled out a pair of dirty, old work gloves. He had secretly stolen them from Clara's desk earlier that day. The gloves were completely soaked in her real sweat. Victor wore her gloves while he touched the drones and the metal locker handle. He left her exact, undeniable scent everywhere. The next morning, armed security guards rushed into the rescue center. The loud sirens terrified everyone. They marched straight to Clara's locker and opened the door violently. The stolen thermal drones fell heavily onto the hard floor. Clara gasped in total shock, her eyes wide with sudden fear. A police handler brought his tracking dog forward. The dog sniffed the expensive drones carefully. The animal immediately sat down and barked, pointing its nose directly at Clara. Her own sweat was the ultimate, undeniable proof. Victor stood in the background, hiding a dark, cruel smile behind his fake concern. The security guards grabbed Clara's arms immediately. She tried to fight back, crying out her innocence. "I did not steal anything," she screamed loudly. "Someone put them in my locker." The manager shook his head in deep disappointment. He fired Clara right there, banning her from the rescue center forever. Clara felt her entire world collapsing. She had lost her honor and her career in a single minute. But she still had her best friend. She turned around and whistled for Ranger. "Come on, boy. We are leaving," she said, her voice shaking with tears. Ranger stood up quickly to follow her. Suddenly, Victor stepped forward and grabbed Ranger's heavy leather leash. Clara stopped, her eyes burning with fresh anger. "Let go of my dog, Victor," she demanded sharply. Victor did not let go. He smiled a very cold, polite smile and pulled a thick white folder from his jacket. "He is not your dog anymore, Clara," Victor said smoothly. He opened the folder and showed a legal document to the manager. It was a formal ownership contract. Clara had signed it 2 years ago when she joined the team. She thought she was signing a simple health insurance form. Victor had secretly altered the legal words on the paper. The document clearly stated that Ranger was the absolute property of the rescue organization, not Clara. Because she was fired for a serious crime, she had lost all her rights. She was stripped of her only remaining family member. Clara fell to her knees, crying uncontrollably. The security guards pushed her out the front door into the cold morning air. Ranger tried to follow her, pulling hard against the heavy leash. Victor pulled the dog back violently. "Sit down, you stupid animal," Victor commanded in a harsh, angry voice. Victor expected the dog to bite him or bark aggressively. But Ranger was an expert in paw logic. The smart dog knew that violence would not help. Instead, Ranger turned his head slightly away from the cruel man. His body became very stiff and perfectly still. Ranger showed the white parts of his eyes, a classic sign called whale eye. He tucked his tail tightly under his stomach. He did not growl. He did not fight. He simply stared at the blank wall. It was not a sign of respect or submission to the new master. It was a display of absolute, silent disgust. Ranger was mentally rejecting the evil man holding his leash. The dog understood the deep betrayal perfectly. Victor smiled, thinking he had won the grand prize. He did not realize he was holding a time bomb that he could never control. 1 week later, the government evaluation board arrived at the rescue center. 3 serious men in dark suits stood in the training field. They held clipboards to decide who would get the $500,000 grant. Victor stood proudly in the center, holding Ranger on a short, tight leash. Victor wanted to prove he was the best handler in the country. He threw a hidden scent bag deep into the thick forest. "Search!" Victor yelled confidently. He expected the famous dog to run like lightning. He waited for the crowd to clap. But absolutely nothing happened. Ranger did not move a single inch. The dog sat on the grass, staring at the empty dirt. His eyes were completely blank and dull. This was a psychological state called learned helplessness. Ranger's brain had completely shut down to protect his heart from the extreme stress. Dogs do not work for money or fake glory. They work for oxytocin, the chemical of true love and deep connection. Ranger could not smell any love on Victor. He only smelled cold fear, greed, and cruelty. Without the bond of a true owner, the dog's inner fire was completely dead. Victor's face turned bright red with pure embarrassment. The government men started writing negative notes on their clipboards. "Go find it," Victor screamed, pulling the leash hard. Ranger just lay down heavily on the grass. He refused to look at the angry man standing above him. Victor lost his temper entirely. He had a secret button hidden inside his jacket pocket. It controlled an illegal electric shock collar hidden under Ranger's thick fur. Victor pressed the button hard, sending a sharp, painful electric current directly into the dog's sensitive neck. Victor expected the sudden pain to make the dog jump up and obey. But paw logic is stronger than physical pain. Ranger did not bark. He did not attack the cruel handler. The sudden, intense stress was too much for his grieving heart. Ranger closed his eyes tightly and simply stopped breathing. The brave dog fainted completely, falling sideways onto the soft grass. His body went entirely limp. The crowd gasped in loud horror. A veterinarian ran onto the field quickly to check the unconscious animal. Victor stood there, looking like a total fool in front of the important judges. The lead judge walked up to Victor with a very angry face. "This is a total disaster," the judge said coldly. "You have exactly 1 week to control this animal and pass the real test. If you fail again, you will lose the grant forever." Victor was officially running out of time. Victor dragged the unconscious dog back into the dark building. He threw Ranger into a cold, heavy metal cage. He locked the thick steel door with a heavy chain. "You will stay in there without food until you learn to obey me," Victor hissed cruelly. He turned off the lights and left. Ranger woke up alone in the cold darkness. His neck burned from the terrible electric shock. His stomach was completely empty, but his mind was perfectly clear and sharp. He knew he had to escape this evil place. He had to find the warm hands that smelled like true love. For 2 long days, Ranger sat quietly in the cage. He did not bark or cry. He saved all his physical energy. On the 3rd night, he began to act very strangely. He started to whine loudly, holding his front right paw high in the air. He limped in painful circles. The night security guard heard the terrible crying. He walked over to the cage with a bright flashlight. He saw the famous dog holding its leg, looking deeply hurt and totally pathetic. The guard felt sorry for the animal. He slowly unlocked the heavy chain to check the broken paw. The guard opened the steel door just a few inches. He reached his hand inside. Suddenly, Ranger stopped whining. The broken leg was a complete, brilliant lie. The dog exploded forward with incredible, unstoppable speed. He hit the heavy steel door with his strong chest, knocking the surprised guard to the floor. Ranger did not bite the fallen man. A true rescue dog never hurts an innocent human. He jumped over the guard and ran silently down the dark hallway. He reached the back exit, but the heavy glass doors were locked by a digital security keypad. He could not jump over the 10-foot fence outside. Ranger looked around the dark room. His sharp nose smelled the faint, warm scent of electricity coming from the wall. He found a thick plastic box near the floor. It covered the main underground wires for the building's security system. Ranger opened his strong jaws and bit down hard on the thick plastic box. His sharp teeth crushed the cables inside. Blue sparks exploded in the dark. The alarm stopped instantly. The digital lock clicked open. Ranger pushed the heavy door with his nose and ran out into the freezing night. A massive winter blizzard was blowing heavy snow across the dark city. The cold wind howled loudly. But Ranger did not care about the dangerous storm. He put his nose to the frozen ground and began to run. The loyal searcher was finally going home to find his true family. The blizzard was fierce and blinding. Ranger ran through the deep, freezing snow for hours. He had to travel 30 dangerous miles across the wild mountains. His paws bled from the sharp ice. His stomach hurt from the terrible hunger. But the memory of Clara's gentle voice gave him endless strength. Deep inside the dark forest, the wind suddenly changed direction. Ranger stopped running. The hair on his back stood up perfectly straight. His sharp nose caught a very dangerous, heavy scent. A large mountain lion stepped silently out of the dark trees. It was hungry and looking for an easy meal. The giant cat lowered its head, ready to attack the tired dog. A normal animal would bark loudly or try to fight. But Ranger was an expert in reading body language. He knew a fight would mean certain death. He immediately used his deep paw logic to survive the deadly encounter. Ranger turned his head completely away from the mountain lion. He avoided all direct eye contact. Then, he opened his mouth and let out a long, slow yawn. He sat down quietly in the snow and licked his own nose. These were classic, calming signals in the animal world. Ranger was sending a clear, peaceful message to the wild predator. He was saying, "I am not a threat and I do not want to fight you." The mountain lion stopped moving. It was deeply confused by the strange, non-violent behavior. The cat expected anger, but it only saw absolute calm. The wild cat watched the quiet dog for a long minute. Finally, the mountain lion lost its hunting instinct. It turned around slowly and disappeared back into the dark, snowy forest. Ranger's brilliant mind had saved his life without a single drop of blood. He stood up and continued his long journey. As the sun finally rose, Ranger reached the edge of his old town. He ran happily to Clara's small, familiar house. But when he arrived, his heart broke. The windows were completely dark. A large bank sign was nailed to the front door. Clara had lost her home to pay her legal debts. Ranger put his nose to the cold dirt. He searched frantically for her faded scent. He tracked her smell through the snowy streets, moving far away from the nice neighborhoods. Finally, he reached the dark edge of the woods. He saw a small, broken, and rusty travel trailer parked in the mud. The scent of her familiar soap and warm tears was very strong here. Clara was living in absolute poverty, pushed to the very edge of the world. Ranger walked slowly toward the rusty metal door. He was exhausted, dirty, and bleeding, but he had finally found his true home. 50 miles away, a terrible tragedy was unfolding. A 7-year-old boy had wandered away from his family camping trip. He had walked straight into the Whispering Caves. It was a massive, dangerous underground network of dark tunnels. The heavy storm outside was causing the deep caves to flood rapidly with freezing water. The local police called Victor and his official rescue team. Victor arrived with loud sirens and bright lights. He brought out his expensive, stolen thermal drones. He wanted to look like a hero on the evening news. He launched the drones into the dark mouth of the flooded cave. But Victor was a fool. He did not understand the deep earth. The Whispering Caves were full of heavy magnetic rocks. The strong magnetic fields instantly destroyed the radio signals. The expensive drones spun out of control and crashed violently into the dark water. His technology was completely blind and useless. Victor stood outside the cave, watching the water rise higher. He was too cowardly to go inside the dangerous tunnels himself. He turned to the crying parents and the news cameras. "I am sorry," Victor lied with a sad face. "The water is too deep. The boy is already gone. We must retreat." Meanwhile, Clara sat alone inside her freezing, rusty trailer. She was drinking a cup of cheap, cold tea. She felt completely dead inside. Suddenly, she heard a soft, scratching sound at the thin metal door. She stood up slowly and turned the handle. The door swung open to the snowy wind. Clara dropped her cup. It shattered on the floor. Ranger stood there, covered in frozen mud and dark blood. Clara fell to her knees, crying wild, happy tears. She opened her arms to hug her best friend. But Ranger did not jump into her warm arms. He stepped back quickly. Ranger dropped an object directly onto the floor in front of Clara's shoes. It was a tiny blue children's sneaker. It was soaked in dark water and a few drops of fresh blood. Clara stared at the small shoe, her rescue instincts waking up instantly. She looked deeply into Ranger's urgent eyes. The brilliant dog had not just run away to find his owner. On his long journey through the snowy mountains, his incredible nose had caught the scent of the lost child first. Ranger had found the cave, grabbed the crucial evidence, and then ran to the only human he trusted. Ranger barked once, a sharp, commanding sound. He spun around and looked back toward the dark mountains. He was telling Clara that the mission was not over. The official teams had failed, but the loyal searcher had found the truth. They had to go into the dark water immediately. Clara did not hesitate for a single second. She grabbed her old headlamp and a thick rope. She jumped into her broken truck, and Ranger leaped into the passenger seat. They drove like crazy through the dangerous, snowy roads. They arrived at the back entrance of the Whispering Caves completely unnoticed. The official police cars were parked far away at the main entrance. Clara and Ranger slipped silently into the dark, narrow tunnel. The air inside the cave was freezing and smelled like wet dirt. The dark water was rising very fast, pulling hard against Clara's heavy winter boots. They moved deep into the dangerous earth. Ranger swam ahead in the freezing water, his nose held high. He followed the invisible scent trail of the terrified boy. Suddenly, the cave shook violently. A loud cracking sound echoed through the dark tunnels. The heavy stone roof above them was breaking apart. "Watch out!" Clara screamed. Large, heavy rocks fell splashing into the dark water. Clara tried to jump back, but the muddy ground slipped under her feet. She fell hard into the freezing river. A massive rock rolled down and pinned her left leg tightly to the bottom of the cave. Clara struggled wildly. The cold water rushed over her shoulders, rising toward her chin. She pushed against the heavy rock, but it was impossible to move. Her breathing became fast and panicked. She was going to drown in the dark. She closed her eyes, preparing for the terrible, cold end. Ranger did not panic. He swam quickly to his trapped owner. A normal dog might try to bite the heavy rock or dig at the mud helplessly. But Ranger used pure paw logic. He knew he could not lift the heavy stone. He had to use the power of the rushing water instead. Ranger dove under the dark water. He opened his strong jaws and bit down hard on the thick strap of Clara's orange life vest. He did not pull her forward against the rock. He swam backward, using his powerful legs and the strong buoyancy of the life vest to change the angle. The dog pulled with the strength of a wild wolf. The new angle twisted Clara's body perfectly. Her trapped leg suddenly slipped free from under the heavy rock. Ranger dragged her safely to a higher, dry rock. Clara hugged the wet dog, coughing up cold water. Her loyal friend had saved her life. Clara tied a bandage tightly around her bleeding leg. She ignored the terrible pain. "Find him, Ranger," she whispered urgently. The golden dog barked and jumped back into the cold river. They swam deeper into the dark, echoing cave. Finally, the bright beam of Clara's headlamp caught a small shape. The lost boy was trapped on a tiny, high ledge. The freezing black water was rising rapidly, almost touching his small knees. He was crying loudly, shaking from the extreme cold. "Hold on. We are here to help you." Clara shouted happily over the loud noise of the rushing water. Ranger swam powerfully toward the high rock. But when the little boy saw the large, wet dog approaching, he screamed in pure terror. He pressed his back hard against the sharp cave wall. "No, go away. I am scared of dogs," the boy cried wildly. He suffered from severe cynophobia. The boy was completely panicked. He looked down at the deadly, rushing water. "If that monster comes closer, I will jump," he threatened, crying uncontrollably. He was ready to throw himself into the deadly river to escape the dog. Clara's heart stopped. She could not climb the rock with her broken leg. Only Ranger could reach the boy in time. But if the dog moved forward, the boy would die. Clara looked at Ranger and shouted a strict command. "Ranger, stand down," she ordered loudly. The well-trained dog stopped swimming instantly. He climbed slowly onto the edge of the boy's rock and stopped. Ranger did not bark. He did not step closer. Instead, he performed a brilliant psychological move. He lowered his front elbows to the whetstone and kept his back end high in the air. This is called a play bow. Then he licked his own lips slowly and looked away from the boy. These perfect body languages sent a powerful, ancient message of absolute safety. Ranger was screaming with his body, "I am a friend, and I want to play." The boy stopped crying. He looked at the gentle, bowing dog. The terrifying monster suddenly looked like a soft, sweet puppy. The boy's rapid breathing slowly calmed down. The fear in his eyes melted away. He reached out a small, shaking hand and touched Ranger's wet, golden fur. Ranger let out a warm, happy sigh. The boy wrapped his arms tightly around the dog's strong neck. Ranger carried him safely through the dark water. Outside the cave, the storm was finally stopping. Bright morning sunlight hit the wet trees. Victor stood in front of 10 different television cameras. He looked very serious and sad. He was putting on a great performance for the world. He wiped a fake tear from his dry eye. "It breaks my heart," Victor said deeply into the microphones. "My team did everything possible. But the cave is totally flooded. The poor child is lost forever. We must remember him with love." The parents of the boy cried loudly in the background. The news reporters looked very sad. Suddenly, a loud, happy bark echoed from the dark woods behind the official police cars. The cameras turned quickly. The parents gasped. Clara limped slowly out of the dark trees, leaning heavily on a thick wooden stick. Walking proudly right beside her was the golden dog, carrying the wet, safe boy on his strong back. The crowd erupted into wild, incredible cheers. The parents ran forward and pulled their crying son from the dog's back. They hugged him tightly, kissing his cold face. Victor's face turned completely white. His fake story was shattered on live national television. He panicked and tried to fix his broken image immediately. Victor ran toward the cameras, pointing at the dog. He wanted the world to think he was the master. "Good boy. Come here, Ranger. Heel," Victor commanded in his loudest, most professional voice. He held out his hand, expecting the dog to obey him in front of the reporters. Ranger walked slowly toward Victor. The crowd went silent. But Ranger did not stop. He walked straight past the evil man like Victor was an invisible ghost. Ranger walked back to Clara. He turned around and sat down heavily, directly on top of Clara's injured foot. He pressed his warm body tightly against her leg and stared fiercely at Victor. This was the ultimate canine behavior called resource guarding. Ranger was claiming Clara as his most precious treasure. He was announcing to the entire world exactly who his true owner was. The fake master was completely rejected. The young boy pointed a shaking finger directly at Victor. "That bad man left me," the boy yelled loudly for all the cameras to hear. He flew his noisy toys into the cave, and then he ran away. "The nice lady and the good dog saved my life." The truth was finally spoken. The news cameras recorded every single word. The reporters immediately turned their microphones toward Victor. He stepped backward, sweating heavily. "The boy is confused." Victor stammered wildly. "It was too dangerous. The dog is mine." But nobody believed the sweating, panicked liar anymore. The local police chief walked forward with a very serious face. "We have some questions for you, Victor," the police chief said coldly. He ordered 2 officers to check Victor's personal car parked nearby. Victor tried to run away, but the strong officers grabbed his arms tightly. The police opened the trunk of Victor's expensive, shiny black car. Inside the trunk, hidden under an old blanket, were the 3 missing thermal drones. Victor had panicked when the dog escaped. He had stolen the drones back from the evidence room, planning to sell them quickly to pay his dangerous gambling debts. His evil, greedy plan was completely exposed to the entire world. The police officers placed heavy metal handcuffs on Victor's wrists. He cried and screamed as they pushed him into the back of a police car. The man who wanted to be a rich hero was going to a cold prison. Justice had arrived swiftly on the wings of the morning sun. A few months later, the world was a very different place. The Government Evaluation Board had seen the live rescue on television. They knew exactly who the real heroes were. They completely canceled Victor's contract and gave the massive $500,000 grant directly to Clara. She did not waste a single penny. Clara bought a beautiful, large piece of green land near the mountains. She opened her very own independent rescue training center. She focused entirely on deep animal psychology and the true bond of love between humans and dogs. She never used shock collars or cruel cages. Her methods saved hundreds of lives. On a warm summer morning, Clara stood in the bright green field, watching her new students train. She smiled peacefully. She looked down at her side. Ranger sat perfectly still, watching the mountains. He did not wear a heavy leash or a tight collar. He was completely free. The loyal searcher leaned his golden head gently against Clara's leg. She reached down and scratched him softly behind his ears. They did not need words or legal papers to prove they belonged together. They shared a silent, unbreakable language of the heart. The true pack had finally found its perfect peace.